The more you know, the less you think you know. The Dunning-Kruger Effect. Have you ever met someone who speaks with absolute confidence about a topic they clearly know very little about? You've probably heard them before, at a dinner table, a meeting, or on the internet, talking with unwavering certainty as if their opinion were truth carved in stone. And then, on the other side, there's the person who actually does know a lot, but speaks cautiously, humbly, even with doubt. Why does this happen? Why do the least informed often speak the loudest, while the most informed hesitate? This isn't just a quirk of personality. It's not just about arrogance or shyness. It's something deeper, something rooted in the very architecture of human cognition. This is the Dunning-Kruger Effect, and it's one of the most profoundly misunderstood truths about intelligence, learning, and self-awareness. But what if I told you that it's not just about other people, it's about you, it's about me? Every one of us is caught in its grip. The Dunning-Kruger Effect is a psychological phenomenon where people with low ability at a task tend to overestimate their own competence, while those with high ability tend to underestimate theirs. But that's just the surface. What it really reveals is a paradox at the heart of human learning. The more you know, the more aware you become of what you don't know. And that awareness doesn't boost your confidence, it humbles it, it destabilizes it. It forces you to confront the terrifying vastness of the unknown. And here's where things get existential. What if certainty is just a symptom of ignorance? What if true wisdom always feels like doubt?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Imagine this as a mountain. At the bottom you know nothing, but you're also blissfully unaware of how little you know. Then you learn a bit and suddenly you feel like a genius. You've reached what's sometimes called Mount Stupid, a peak of confidence that far exceeds your actual knowledge. But as you keep learning, something strange happens. Your confidence plummets. You realize how deep the rabbit hole goes. You see how much complexity, nuance, and uncertainty lies beneath the surface. And the more you learn, the more you realize how much more there is to learn. That's the descent into what Dunning and Kruger called the Valley of Despair. And if you keep going, if you keep learning, keep reflecting, you might slowly climb the slope of enlightenment. But you'll never reach the same level of blind confidence you had at the beginning, because now you know too much to be sure. This isn't just a model of learning, it's a mirror. It forces us to ask, where on that mountain am I right now? Am I confidently standing on Mount Stupid, unaware of my ignorance? Or am I stuck in the valley of despair, questioning everything, doubting myself, feeling like a fraud? And most importantly, how do I keep climbing, not to feel smarter, but to become wiser? You see, the real danger isn't ignorance. Ignorance is a starting point. The danger is thinking you know enough when you don't. That's where arrogance breeds. That's where misinformation spreads. That's where ideologies become dogmas and opinions become weapons. And the internet has supercharged this. Because now everyone has a platform, everyone has a voice. And the loudest voices are often the ones least aware of their limitations. But what if the future doesn't belong to the loudest? What if it belongs to the most thoughtful, the most curious, the most willing to question themselves? This is where we need to shift our values. Instead of rewarding confidence, we should reward humility. Instead of praising certainty, we should praise inquiry. Because real wisdom isn't about having all the answers, It's about knowing how to ask better questions. It's about recognizing that knowledge is not a destination, but a horizon that keeps moving as you move toward it. So I want to ask you a question, and I want you to really sit with it. When was the last time you changed your mind about something important? Not because someone proved you wrong, but because you discovered you didn't know enough. That moment, that shift, that quiet realization, that's where growth lives. That's where real learning begins. But we avoid those moments because they hurt, they bruise the ego, they make us feel small. But maybe that smallness is sacred. Maybe that feeling of being overwhelmed, of not knowing, of being lost, that's not failure, that's the path. That's the only way forward, because the more we learn, the more we realize how much there is to learn. And that realization isn't a flaw, it's the foundation of wisdom. Socrates said it best, "I know that I know nothing." But he didn't say that from a place of defeat. He said it from a place of deep insight. He understood that knowledge begins with humility, and that the truly wise are not those who claim to know everything, but those who have the courage to admit how little they know. The confidence illusion. Why the loudest person in the room is usually the least informed. There's a strange irony that plays out across every classroom, boardroom, social media thread, and dinner table. The person who knows the least often speaks the most confidently. They state their opinions as facts, shut down opposing views with passion, and rarely, if ever, admit uncertainty. We've all seen it, and we've all wondered, how can someone be so sure of something they clearly don't understand? This isn't just annoying, it's dangerous, because confidence, when untethered from knowledge, becomes a weapon that shapes conversations, influences decisions, and even guides entire societies down false paths. And what's most deceptive is that we're wired to follow it. As humans, we instinctively equate confidence with competence. It feels safe, it feels strong. But that feeling is often an illusion, a cognitive mirage. And the more we understand the Dunning-Kruger Effect, the more we realize that confident ignorance is not just a personal flaw, but a cultural epidemic. Let's break this down. The Dunning-Kruger Effect doesn't just describe individual blind spots, it explains a social dynamic. When people lack the knowledge to understand a subject deeply, they also lack the knowledge to recognize their own ignorance. This creates a double blind. They don't know enough to know how much they don't know, so they overestimate themselves, and because they appear so sure, others assume they must be right. Confidence becomes self-reinforcing. It's rewarded, celebrated, and often promoted. Meanwhile, the person who actually understands the topic, the one who sees the complexity, the nuance, the gray areas, speaks more cautiously. They say things like, "It depends," or "I'm not certain," or "There's more we need to consider." And what happens? They're seen as weak, hesitant, even uninformed. This is the confidence illusion. It's not just that the loudest person might be wrong, it's that we've been trained to listen to them because they're loud. And this creates a feedback loop where ignorance is rewarded and wisdom is sidelined. It's why a shallow thinker with charisma can lead millions while a thoughtful expert is ignored. It's why misinformation spreads faster than truth, because the truth is often slow, careful, and uncertain. But lies can be loud, simple, and seductive. And here's the painful part. We're all susceptible to this, not just as listeners, but as speakers. Every one of us has areas where we've mistaken confidence for knowledge, where we've assumed we understood something because we had just enough information to form an opinion, but not enough to grasp its depth. That's the trap. A little knowledge feels like a lot. It gives us just enough fuel to sound smart, to argue, to post, to preach. But real knowledge, deep, informed, nuanced knowledge, often leaves us speechless, not because we know less, but because we understand just how much we don't know. So what do we do with this? How do we live in a world where confidence often beats competence, noise drowns out depth, and popularity overrides truth? We start by turning inward. We stop mistaking our own certainty for accuracy. We begin to question where our confidence comes from. Is it based on evidence, experience, or just repetition and emotion? And we ask the same of others, not to tear people down, but to elevate the conversation, to resist the urge to follow the loudest voice, and instead seek the most informed one, even if it whispers. But this also requires courage, because humility isn't always applauded. In a world that idolizes certainty, being honest about what you don't know can feel like weakness. But it's not. It's strength, it's integrity, and it's the only path to real growth. Because when we stop pretending to know everything, we give ourselves permission to actually learn something. So here's a question for you to sit with. When you speak, are you trying to express truth, or are you trying to feel powerful? That question cuts deep if you let it. It forces you to examine your motives, to notice when you're performing knowledge instead of pursuing it. And that self-awareness, that's where transformation begins. The loudest person in the room isn't always the smartest. Often they're the most afraid of seeming unsure, afraid of being questioned, afraid of confronting their own limits. But you don't have to be that person. You can choose silence over noise, depth over performance, curiosity over ego. Climbing down the mountain, why real wisdom begins when certainty ends. There's a moment in every intellectual journey when the ground gives way. You thought you knew something, maybe even a lot, and suddenly you don't. The facts you were so sure of begin to unravel. The theories you clung to start to fracture, and the confident voice in your head goes quiet. That moment feels like a collapse, a failure, even a kind of death. But it's not. It's the beginning. It is the exact place where real wisdom starts, when certainty ends. Because certainty, for all its comfort, is a closed door. It shuts out doubt. It silences curiosity. It gives the illusion of completion in a world that is always unfinished. And wisdom, true, enduring, transformative wisdom, requires that door to remain open. When we talk about climbing down the mountain, we're not talking about giving up. We're talking about moving past the illusion of mastery. We're talking about the moment when you stop standing on Mount Stupid, shouting down at the world with your limited vision, and begin your descent into the valley below, a place of humility, of questions, of depth. It's uncomfortable. It's humbling. It's also the most honest place you can be, because down there, you're no longer pretending to understand everything. You're no longer trying to win arguments or dominate conversations. You're listening, you're learning, you're letting go of the need to be right and embracing the desire to be real. And this process doesn't just apply to knowledge in the abstract, it applies to how we live. Think about how many of our biggest life decisions are made under the illusion of certainty. We convince ourselves that we know what we want, who we are, where we're going, and then life happens, things fall apart, plans fail, identities shift, and in that chaos we're forced to face an uncomfortable truth. We didn't know as much as we thought we did. But what if, and that's not a problem, what if that's the point? Wisdom isn't about having the right answers, it's about asking better questions. It's about knowing how to navigate uncertainty without being paralyzed by it. It's about being able to say, I don't know, not with shame, but with strength. That's a radical act in today's world. We're surrounded by people, online, in politics, in media, who are desperate to appear sure, desperate to be right. But the wisest people you'll ever meet are the ones who are comfortable in the unknown. They don't cling to their beliefs like weapons, they hold them like tools, useful, but always subject to change. Climbing down the mountain means trading ego for openness. It means recognizing that the map you've been using might be flawed or incomplete or based on someone else's assumptions, and that's okay. Because the goal isn't to reach the top and declare victory. The goal is to keep moving, keep growing, keep evolving, and sometimes that means taking a step back, not because you failed, but because you've learned enough to see that your previous certainty was too small for the truth. So let me ask you something that might make you uncomfortable. What belief do you hold today that you might be completely wrong about? Not a small belief, a big one. A belief about yourself, about life, about what matters. Can you imagine letting go of it? Can you imagine being open to something bigger, deeper, more complex? That's not weakness, that's courage. That's the kind of strength that doesn't need to shout, it just is. And here's the paradox. The more often you're willing to let go of what you think you know, the closer you get to something that feels like truth. Not the truth of facts and figures, but the deeper truth of wisdom, of seeing clearly without clinging tightly, of holding space for contradiction, of being able to say, I know a lot, but I also know that there is so much more I don't know. That's not a step backward. That's the path forward. So don't be afraid to climb down the mountain. Don't be afraid to question, to doubt, to start over. That descent isn't a fall. It's a return to reality, to humility, to the raw wonder of not knowing. And in that place, wisdom grows, quietly, slowly, deeply. The humble genius, how great thinkers stay curious in a world obsessed with answers. There's a quiet strength in the greatest minds of history, a trait so profound yet so rare that it often goes unnoticed. It's not intelligence, it's not memory or logic or even creativity. It's humility. The truly great thinkers, the ones who shaped our understanding of the world, who questioned everything and dared to imagine more, were not those who claimed to have all the answers. They were the ones who never stopped asking questions. They were curious, restlessly, endlessly curious. And that curiosity didn't come from arrogance, but from awe, from the realization that the more they understood, the more mysterious the world became. That's the paradox of genius. It's not about knowing more than everyone else. It's about realizing how little anyone truly knows and having the courage to explore that space. But we live in a time that doesn't reward that kind of humility. We live in a world obsessed with answers, fast ones, clear ones, simple ones. We want certainty and we want it now. We want headlines that tell us how things are. We want influencers who speak with conviction, politicians who never admit doubt, experts who never hesitate. And in that rush for clarity, we lose the most important thing: the space to think, the space to wonder, the space to not know. That's what makes curiosity so radical today. It's not just an intellectual habit, it's a form of rebellion. It's a refusal to be boxed in by easy narratives and ready-made truths. It's the willingness to sit with complexity, to explore the gray areas, to hold two opposing ideas in your mind without rushing to resolve them. Einstein once said, "The important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing." Think about that. He wasn't obsessed with being right, he was obsessed with the questions themselves. That's why he saw what others didn't, because he looked longer, listened deeper, and never let his ego close the door to wonder. The humble genius doesn't seek applause, they seek understanding. And they know that understanding is never final. It's not a trophy you win, but a horizon you chase, and every time you get closer, the horizon moves. That's not discouraging, it's liberating, because it means your growth never ends. Your mind never finishes expanding. Your soul never stops evolving, but only if you stay curious. Only if you keep asking. So ask yourself, when was the last time you were truly curious about something? Not to prove a point or win an argument, but just to understand. When was the last time you read something that challenged you? When was the last time you said, "I don't know," and meant it, not as a weakness, but as an invitation? That's what we need more of. Not more opinions, but more openness. Not more noise, but more thought. Not more answers, but better questions. Because the truth is, the wisest people don't walk around shouting what they know, they walk around quietly wondering what they've missed. They listen more than they speak. They change their minds when the evidence changes. They learn from everyone, even from those they disagree with, and they never ever stop being students. In a culture that rewards certainty, be someone who cultivates doubt. In a society that values performance, be someone who values depth. In a world chasing answers, be someone who honors the question, because here's the final secret of the Dunning-Kruger Effect. It's not just a trap for the uninformed. It's a mirror for all of us. At every stage of our lives, with every new idea we encounter, we are at risk of falling into the illusion of knowing. The only antidote is humility. The only way forward is curiosity. The only real wisdom is knowing how little you know and choosing to keep learning anyway. So stay curious, stay humble, and remember, the more you know, the less you think you know, and that's exactly how it should be.